Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. My name's Gavin Baulch, and my guest today is Ian Walter from Build AIDS Mission. Welcome.
Thanks, Gavin.
Again,
glad to be here.
You're one who's travelled, and if we look at this T-shirt, it's saying a few things. Tell me what's on the T-shirt.
Well, I can't tell you what the writing on it says, but it's got Vanuatu on the right shoulder. I spent most of my year in Vanuatu when I'm not here in Australia.
Okay, and doing what?
I actually started off doing missions work for a Bible translator, but now transgressed into aid work since the cyclone last year, 12 months ago.
All right. And you're working in a particular area with the Catholic Church at the moment.
Yeah, we're on a little island called Ambram. Got an active volcano on the island, and on the north end of the island there's a little corner called Alal property, and the Catholics got a church out there and a school and all that, and yeah, and they're in lots and lots of needs of help. Right,
okay, so the cyclone left what? What's the need specifically?
Well, what happened was on one of the classrooms here, triple classroom, the cyclone ripped the roof off. So that was 12 months ago, and that building is still at the moment, hasn't had the roof replaced. So they're squeezing classes into other buildings within the compound of the Catholic Church there, the Catholic community.
Right, and does the church have a roof on it? How's it coping?
Oh, the church is fine, yeah.
Oh,
the church has got a roof on, but it's a bit big. Church probably seats 600 to 700 people.
Wow.
And they get that most Sundays for services. Awesome. Right, I've never had the privilege to be at a service, but I've heard that that's what they get, 600 or 700. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but the other thing, when the roof come off the building, it's now not collecting water, so they're in a dire straits with drought problems there at the moment.
El Nino?
Pardon? El Nino? Well, that's what they're saying, El Nino.
Yes.
But I would say it's the cyclone effect.
Yes.
Yeah, so the droughts come about because of the cyclones, change the weather system around, because, 1 in 100 year storms, and yep. So,
all right, so are they short of tanks, like holding capacity?
Well, that's one of the reasons, short of tanks, but also no roof catchment area on that school building that took up a fair amount of room. The buildings are 8 metres by 6 metres, and 3 of them are missing their roofs, so that catchment area is gone.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, as you say, they're short of tanks.
Yeah. Okay. So the Catholic community there are throwing funds at it, or is it coming from overseas? What's happening? How do we look at that need?
Funds? Well, no funds come from the Catholic community there, because they're self-supporting church. So as far as I understand, there's no funds coming from overseas. At the moment I've got some money that was donated for cyclone relief, and I've got enough to start the roof, but not enough to finish it. So that'll come from Build Aid's people to support Build Aid have given money, and some of that money's going towards to start the re-roof on those 3 classrooms, and we hope to start that around July this year.
Right.
But whether we can finish it, that comes down to the grace of God.
Yeah, what comes in. Okay, well that's a current project, but before you got your hands dirty and started building in areas of need, where did life begin for you?
Life began for me, well, I grew up in a little country town called Hamilton in the Western District in Victoria. So, yeah, born there, one of 9 children. Unfortunately, Mum was stillborn, and the twins lived for about a day and then passed away. So there's 6 growing adults. We're all above our 50s and all still alive. Mm-hmm. And we lost our mum 2 years ago, and Dad 16 or 17 years ago.
Right. Okay. So you're the next generation.
We're the next generation.
Yes,
Yep.
Yes. And was there much reference back to that loss, the stillborn, and the loss of the twins? Did that play a part?
No, it wasn't a big mention in the family. It wasn't huge, but since I've got older, I went looking for the burial plot, and we found it and found a headstone and all that. So yeah, it's all there. We all know it's part of our history, and something that Mum and Dad dealt with, probably didn't deal with as kids, because when they were born I was probably 1 or 2. So
yes.
So we probably wouldn't have known anything about it, and we knew about it, but yeah, it was never seemed to have affected Mum and Dad and that. So yeah.
Okay, so now here you are, a person with faith and working across a range of faith communities. You've got the assurance that when you get to heaven, there they'll be.
There they'll be, that's right, yes.
That's pretty
so they
cool.
will be. So I know that they'll be there, and Mum will be there, and Dad, and the whole family will be there to rejoice in the Lord.
Yeah, fantastic. So Warrnambool played a part?
Yeah, Warrnambool played a part. Yeah, so, well, let's step back a bit.
Yes.
I grew up in Hamilton, primary school, secondary school, left school at 15. So got out as soon as I could and become a carpenter. So I only went to Form 3 back there, Year 9 now. So, and done my apprenticeship, and then got married at 21 and moved to Warrnambool. As my wife was attending Warrnambool Institute down there, so we moved down there for her to complete a degree and start our married life together. Yeah.
Well, the old institute's on the front pages of the newspaper now. They might be shutting it down after all these years.
Are they? Oh, that's something you've told me. I haven't been away so much these days. I hadn't seen that. Yeah. So that'd be sad for the town.
Oh, it will. A big loss. All right. So from Warrnambool, where did you go?
So Warrnambool. So when we were in Warrnambool, I met a pastor, Tim Loftus, down there, and he was moving to Melbourne to start a church in Hoppers Crossing, and he headed off in June, July, and unbeknownst to us, the Lord had plans that me and Joanna would move to Melbourne for her to start a job in, back then, State Bank Victoria, and I gave up my job at the YMCA in Warrnambool to come down and for her career, that's what she'd studied for, and we helped become foundation members of a church in Hoppers Crossing called Suburban Baptist Church.
Yeah. Awesome. So you happen to land in the same general area?
Well, not really. When we moved down, we moved to Armidale, so it was easy for Joanna to commute into the city, but we used to drive out the 3/4 of an hour out to Hoppers Crossing every Sunday, and probably the second week we were there, found a block of land, bought the block of land in the area, and then 12 months later, once being a carpenter, I built my own house and we moved out there permanently, Hoppers Crossing.
Well, I'm glad you built your own house, because that's going to give people confidence that you can build their house.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll take a break.
Thank you.
You're watching Support Life. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Ian Walter from Build Aid Missions. Well, we've looked at a bit of your life and how you're on an island helping the Catholic diocese to put some roofs on schools and bring water into the arena.
Yes.
But how did your settling in Melbourne and this skill of building, and you end up in Vanuatu? I mean, there's a whole transition.
What's going on? Whole story, yeah.
What is it?
Well, so we moved to Melbourne 28 years ago. So in that time of the church, and went back as a carpenter. I had some problems with my back, so that's a whole other story. But then got back being a carpenter, started my own building business, had a franchise called Hotonda Homes. So I built over 100 odd homes in the western suburbs over 15 years being in the franchise. But in that time, through the church, a couple of ministers approached me about helping out Bible translators out in remote communities in the South Pacific. So there was one specifically on a little island called Candrian, just off Papua New Guinea. So I went and helped them, and I actually went 4 times. I hadn't planned that I'd go 4 times, but it got into my blood that I needed to go help these people live in better conditions than what they lived in, and I can tell you that missionaries do live in some very tough conditions out there in remote areas. So I did that for 4 or 5 years, on and off, helping 2 or 3 different families trying to make their living conditions, especially the wife. Yes. They do it real tough out there. Yes. Yeah, so the husband's out there, and most men can handle the tough conditions, but the wife's got to bring up children and homeschool and cook meals, and it's very hot and humid communities. So that's how I got started. And then the Lord asked me 3 years ago to go to do a job in Vanuatu. So up to then I hadn't been to Vanuatu, never knew where Vanuatu was. So I went and done a field trip over there, and while I was there, the Lord really worked on my heart. Yes. He just said to me, you can't do this. You can't do this part-time. If you're going to do it and you're going to be committed to me, you have to commit your life. So I prayed about it, and then come home and spoke to my wife about it and prayed about it. And everywhere for the next 2-3 weeks, every sermon, every message I listened to on the radio, anything that was done, it was kept telling me, you need to go serve. So we made, as a family, we made a commitment to go full-time missionaries.
Okay, so we could say that, that there was a moment in your life, fairly recently, where God picked up a piece of 4x4 and clobbered you and said, hey, wake up, this is what I want.
Yep, that's right. And,
Okay.
and I mean, when you can look back now, you can see God's plan.
Yes.
Right? It's very easy to look back and see God's plans and the things he puts in places and so that you go and do what he wants as long as you listen and ask for his direction and guidance.
All right, so starting off, did you just dump the franchise? What?
No, it wasn't. Well, at the time I'd already put in place to move on from the franchise. Well, not really move on, I'd put in place to grow the business bigger, because when you're being a builder, you either had to build 5 or 6 homes a year, and you could do that as husband and wife, or you then needed to go to 30 and 40. And I put in place to go to 30 and 40. Well, the Lord didn't have plans for that. So he made our business slow down, and I put people in place to take my position. And I was working for someone else at the time on a contract. And he just said, but that was his guidance to say, well, you can walk away from this and close the business down. So I had to put off 5 full-time employees, but that was June, July when I made that decision to put them off. But I made sure that they all had a full-time job before they lost their positions, and by November, December we were able to close the building. We took no more new contracts. Yes. We still had projects to complete, house contracts, and then we had all them finished by Easter, but I was doing build aid in between.
All right, now notoriety, how did people sort of knock on your door and say, oh, we need some help? What happened?
Well, with the one in Vanuatu, it was a full house build, so there was a big commitment there. So I actually went around and visited churches to try and get people to come and help me, because it's too hard to work out in the mission fields on your own. Yeah. So I go around churches, any churches that will let us visit, and even the Bible studies or ladies groups or whatever, we come and give a talk and we mention what we do, and we take volunteers with us out to help build we built the Bible translators home. But while we were building the Bible translators home, we found out about a community that needed a school, and that's where the aid work started to come in.
Right. Okay. So you raised funds here in Australia.
Yep.
And the people that go with you, they're not paid. Are they volunteers?
Yeah, and that's what people get their cut. I'm going away to work for 2 weeks and not get paid, and that's what. But the people that are going already know their commitment. But some people just can't understand. People will give up 2 weeks holidays to come and work and do God's work overseas.
Wow. So how's the response from the diocese now over in Vanuatu on this island? When you're placing the school, are they pretty excited about what's going on?
They're very excited. They can't wait for me to get back and put the roof. They've been waiting 12 months, and they've seen me drive up and down. I drive past their community every week when I'm out there. Yes. And I've been going up to a little school called Megamone and building their double classroom, which was funded by New Zealand Aid. Yes. But they're desperate for me to be back at them, and the struggle has been funds. Yes. Yeah, that does make it difficult sometimes, but we've got some there at the moment, and so we were able to start, and hopefully we can raise enough to complete the project. All
right, now funds might come in, but you don't just kind of airlift and drop it in the backyard of these places, do you?
No, I wish it was that easy.
What happens? What's the journey for materials?
For materials? Well, we're in Port Vila. Well, let's go back. To get a container load of stuff from Australia, it takes 2 or 3 weeks, and it's 6,000 instead of 3, because unfortunately Vanuatu is only an importer, not an exporter, so you've got to send a container over and then send it back, so it's double the cost normally. Then once it gets to Vanuatu, we unload it, or you buy it in town. Then it goes on a big barge, and then it can be anywhere from 2 days to 3 months before you get it, depending on the seas and where it gets on the loads. And then once it gets to that, it gets dropped on a beach, and then we've got to transport it up the roads to the building sites, depending on where it is.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of logistics, isn't it?
Yes, lots and lots of logistics. And the other thing, they've got no running water, no power, so we have to deal with all that. It's all done by hand.
Well,
make our own bricks and all that.
Okay. Well, on that making our own bricks, we need to make a break here. Yep. You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch and my guest is Ian Walter from Build Aid Missions. Well, Ian, here you are doing this building, this work for a whole range of needy people. But there was a time when you had a bad back. And if that hadn't resolved itself, you wouldn't be doing nothing for no one.
That's right, Gavin, yes. Yeah.
All right, so tell us about this back moment.
Yeah, I was about 23 years of age, newly married. Our first child had been born and I was putting her to bed one night and I collapsed, putting her to bed, and I had to crawl out of her bedroom back into the lounge room, and I didn't think anything of it, but they sent me to doctors, and then the doctors said, doesn't look good, you've got a spondylolisthesis of the fifth lumbar, and they were all doom and gloom, and long story short, they said after that I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I was 30 unless I had some bones put down the back of my spine to do a back fusion. So
okay, yeah. So was that a steel rod? And
no, just bone. I don't know. I never got to the stage.
Yes.
I wouldn't allow them to do that.
Yes.
I had to give up my work as a carpenter, and my wife had to give up her uni degree at the time. So she was 12 months off being finished, but she had to give up the uni degree because there was no support back then for income. So she became the breadwinner for the family, and I become Mr. Mum. And yeah, and that's where we were for two odd years. I've done that. So.
All right. Now, back in those days, all right, when you hurt your back, the philosophy about how you recover or don't recover is very different to today. Tell us about that.
Yeah, back those days it was all bed rest, and I had lots of bed rest. That's why I was taking doctor's advice. So lots and lots of bed rest, but I could feel my back getting worse. Started to get pins and needles in the legs, no feeling. So it wasn't the best position. So in the end, I actually, to get my mind active again, because I'm a very active person and I was becoming frustrated, I became president of the local football club, and I hired a coach for the footy club that worked evenings. So I filled in for him at his job at the YMCA in Warrnambool 2 nights a week so he could go coach the football team I was president for. But in that time, I got asked to coach some junior basketball teams at the time because I was a reasonable basketball player, and I was on the courts trying to teach them from the sides without getting on the court. And then I felt I needed to go out and help them, to show them what they had to do. It's easy to speak when you're coaching, but it's easy to show. And people used to say to me, well, you're not allowed to do this. And I said, well, sorry, I need to show them. And by starting to exercise again, I started to lose the pins and needles. So I thought, So I then gave up my workers' compensation claim to go back and start playing sport and do all that again, and started to get active in life and build the strength up in the back muscles. And I still deal with it today. I still got the same problem, but I know when it's bad, when I haven't done enough work on the muscles, and medical doctors are now saying, well, you need to exercise, and they've changed the whole system around. And I'm just thankful I never went ahead and had the bone fusion on my back.
Yes, and I think we know too that there's reports that once they open your back up, bones tend to go soft or calcify.
Yeah, the discs in between apparently I've heard that too, yes, that they do. And it makes, so they might fix one problem, but then they cause another problem. But I still get the vertebrae moving, anywhere from 10 to 12 mil in the back that squeezes the sciatica down the, and I still have problems, but I'm still play AFL Masters football to this day.
Okay, and you use a saw and swing a hammer?
Yes.
And help out over in Vanuatu. So where's that project at with the Catholic Diocese?
Well, as I said, I'm hoping to get a team together for July to be in there to put the roof on. So at the moment, I have no volunteers for that at the moment. So anyone out there watching who wants to make contact with us, I'm pretty sure that you guys will put up my details that they can make contact for either the email and we'll get back in contact with them.
Okay, so what's the skill level you're looking for?
I'll take any skills.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't have to be any skill level at all. We'll take, Christian, non-Christians, we'll take anybody. Doesn't have to be a carpenter. There's always a job for someone on the ground to pass roof sheets up or timber up, and anyone that's after a life experience. And as I said, We are a Christian organisation, so we do devotions every morning before we go out on the site. And if people choose not to be part of that, that's fine. We don't discriminate.
Okay, so for what period of time and when are you looking for some volunteers exactly?
Always 2 weeks for first timers.
Yes.
I've had people that come back second and third and fourth times, and I'll take them for 3 or 4 because they know what conditions are like and the food they've got to eat and so on, and the hard place to get to. But yeah, so 2 weeks, and at the moment we're looking at July.
Okay, of this year.
Yeah, this year.
Now, how do you raise funds for their airfares? What's happening there?
Well, normally up to the individual, and our costs at the moment are $18.50 for the 2 weeks. That covers your international airfares and all your flights internal and so on, and the food and the transport out.
Okay, now the government over there took an interest when this last cyclone kind of went through. Tell me the story.
Yeah, well, the government took some interest, and because the first project I done was for a public school, they're now looking for me to do 2 or 3 others, and they'd like me to do more. But unfortunately, the government's got no money, so we're purely fund sufficient on AusAid or New Zealand Aid or churches to raise any money for any of the schools. And I mean, we talk about the Catholic school and we talk about the public schools, but I can know of 5 other schools that had roofs completely ripped off that we haven't even looked at yet.
Yes. Okay. You build a little differently to what others do because your buildings are still standing and others have fallen over. What's that?
Well, most of their buildings out there are out of bark huts, but we're building out of bricks and solid. And the other structure that we've done is a lot of them used to have big roof overhangs over the edge of the building, 5, 6, some of them up to 1.2 metres wide, and in a cyclone the wind gets trapped underneath that and it rips the roof off. So we've cut all our eaves and all our overhangs on the barge gable ends so that doesn't happen, and we've put window shutters down over windows on those. That we can actually take the stays out and drop them down and act as protection from coconuts as they fly through cyclones.
Well, now there's a thought that had never entered my head, flying coconuts.
Yes, they're like cannonballs. Fortunately, I got out last cyclone 2 days before, but yeah, once the wind gets them at 350 k's an hour and you've got a coconut flying through the air, it's apparently not a pretty sight.
All right. Well, on that hardship note of flying coconuts, we'll let you get back to Vanuatu.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, Ian.
Thanks, Gavin.
You've been watching Support Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye.